Hi, my name is Mike Sowers with Commercial Investors Group, and today I'm going to use these kids' building blocks to help you visualize commercial leases. Commercial leases can be very difficult to understand. So why don't I jump right into it, and hopefully through this video you'll be able to better understand them and be able to make better decisions as a property owner or as a tenant. So what I've done here is I've color coded everything to help break it down and make it more simple for everybody to understand. The items in green I have here are the three major property expenses for any property. These are most commonly paid for by the landlord, except for in net and triple net leases. The items in yellow can go either way. They can be the expense of the tenant or the expense of the owner. And the items in red are typically owner expenses that are not passed on except in the case of an absolute net lease. Now there's 5 key types of leases, but whatever they're called, and we often see them misnamed and mislabeled, especially people getting triple net versus absolute net leases confused. Let's try and simplify this for everybody, okay? So if this stack here represents all of the categories of property expenses that can come up on a property. So what we're going to try and do is show you the two extremes of the spectrum and where these expenses lie. So we're going to start with what's called an absolute gross or full service lease. So in a full service or absolute gross lease, 100% of all of these expenses land on the owner's pile. So the tenant simply makes one fixed payment to the landlord, and that covers everything. Now, a step down from that, which we often see as a gross lease, would include all of these items except for potentially repairs that are within the tenant's unit and utilities that are in the tenant's unit. So most often when we say a gross lease, it covers all of the expenses except for usually some in-unit expenses, like if they have separate utilities or things like that. Those may end up on the tenants. Again, these yellow ones can kind of go either way, and it should be noted that there's utilities within the unit and there's utilities for common areas. So that brings me to my next point, which is this term here, CAM. You're going to hear CAM a lot. Some people will say that CAM includes property taxes, and I want to kind of clear that up. I have a really good CCIM instructor that helped me understand that CAM simply stands for Common Area Maintenance. That would be the utilities, repairs, and improvement expenses for the common areas of the building. Stairwells, hallways, bathrooms, and the exterior of the building. So all the maintenance and repairs for those items and the utilities for those items would be considered CAM. Those in a triple net lease is the third item. So that brings me to my next type of lease, which is the triple net lease. Oftentimes shown as 3 N's, net, net, net. So what do the 3 N's stand for? The 3 N's stand for these 3 items in green. So in a triple net lease, the property taxes, insurance, and common area maintenance are actually paid for by the tenant. Now, the utilities and repairs, depending on how the building's set up, can go either way. So vacancy cost. So if a unit is vacant, the utilities and the repairs, and again, it depends on how the lease is written. What most commonly happens is utilities and repair items for vacant units go to the landlord. Utilities and repair items for in the unit, separately metered utilities and repairs within the unit generally go to the tenant. So for these items, I'm going to kind of put them in the middle here. Okay? Now, I do want to help everybody understand that in a triple net lease, the landlord still maintains some of the expenses. So oftentimes management and marketing do go to the tenant, and this is usually about how a triple net lease would break down. The owner is going to pay for all of these items and then pass through those expenses to the tenant. Usually they set a budget at the beginning of the year, and the tenant would pay 1/12 of the expected annual expenses for these items each month, and then at the end of the year they would reconcile those costs. So it is important to note that in a triple net lease, the landlord still pays for the items up front and then recovers them throughout the year, and then there's a reconciliation. So we call these expense pass-throughs. It's important to note how that's different from an absolute net lease, where the tenant actually directly pays for these major items and takes on all of the expenses. So this would be a triple net lease. Usually utilities and repairs associated with vacancies will be absorbed by the landlord. Usually utilities and repairs for the unit the tenant is rented will be absorbed by the tenant. The property taxes, insurance, and CAM, that's what the 3N stands for, are paid by the landlord and then recovered by the landlord through a 1/12 collection each month and then a reconciliation at the end of the year. Capital improvements would be large improvements to the building that extend its useful life or increase its value. Completely replacing a roof would be a capital improvement versus doing a roof repair might fall under this repair item. So sometimes there's a little bit of a gray area there, and so it's important to make sure that you thoroughly understand the lease. In most triple net leases that I'm seeing in our area, capital improvements will be the responsibility of the landlord, but it is all written into the lease how that's going to work. And therefore, as a tenant, you want to make sure that you have a good lawyer who can help understand and navigate through your lease language. Leasing fees are not expensed in the year they're paid. In Minnesota, we don't pay the leasing fees over time. We generally pay those up front. So let's say you got a 5-year lease and we pay $5,000 in a leasing commission up front. The leasing commission would go on as a current asset on the books, and that would be amortized over the term of the lease, so the landlord would get to write off $1,000 per year for the 5 years of the lease as an expense. How your lease is written will determine whether that $5,000 is considered a CAM expense, or if the $1,000 per year is considered a CAM expense, or if none of it's considered a CAM expense. Again, be careful about falling into the trap that all triple net leases or all gross leases are the same. Every one of these items can have varying situations where the landlord or the tenant may be responsible for it. So it's important to really understand the terms of your lease. And that brings us to our final absolute net lease. Absolute net lease, which is where we most commonly see this in single tenant retail buildings like a McDonald's or something like that. That's where your tenant would directly pay all expenses. And that'd be an absolute net. So this is what we call mailbox money for the owners. People feel that these leases are extremely safe, but keep in mind that the credit tenants have defaulted, and having a multi-tenant building sometimes can diversify your vacancy risk if there are market factors that cause some vacancy. So I don't think that a 20-year absolute net with Burger King, for example, is going to be, a home run every single time. We just saw 9 stores go out of business in this area that are Burger Kings. So I hope that this video was helpful for you in understanding going from an absolute net all the way to the polar opposite, which is your absolute gross, or sometimes called a full service, and everything in between. Depending on how your lease is written, each of these items may end up in the middle or may end up on one side of the spectrum. I try not to get too caught up in triple nets, grosses, things like that. It's either full service or absolute gross, or it's absolute net. Anything in between, I try not even to put a name on it because every lease is different. So I'm Mike Sowers from Commercial Investors Group. If you liked what you learned, go ahead and check out the link below and you can see more videos like this. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Have yourself a wonderful day.